In today's episode of the SYNTHO podcast, I am joined by Gene on Earth. I am very privileged to welcome him on this show, as I was not sure if he was going to come on when I first asked him, but we actually met when he came to play for You&Me the end of January 2020, and we really hit it off. So I had both fingers crossed when I asked Gene, and yeah, we had a really good chat. Gene's one of my favourite producers, so it was great to pick his brains on some stuff and talk about what he's been up to. He recently launched his Nugnet course, and we've got a discount link attached to the video for that if anyone's interested in doing it. But yeah, he's a really top guy, and it was a very fun chat. And to give some context to it, we were talking about yoga in parts. That came from us doing yoga in my studio at about 6 p.m. the night after the party. Yeah. And before we kick off, I'll just remind you that the podcast is sponsored by myself, the SYNTHO Hub electronic music learning platform, helping producers take their music to the next level. So if you're making music and you're stuck and you're not sure how to get better, well, I am here to help you. Just head over to synthohub.com for more information, or just message me. And yeah, let's get straight into today's episode. So, how's life?
It is pretty good. I'm still recovering from knee surgery, which was 1 month ago, which has been taking a while. I haven't really been able to walk properly since March, but hopefully it is ready in a couple of weeks. I had to cancel a US tour because of it, but few June or like June and July gigs, I am not canceling, and I'm just bringing someone with me to carry my bag while I am still not walking on my own completely.
Was that injury? Was that an injury, or was it something that needed to be done?
I think it's because I was going too hard on the yoga mat. It's the only thing that could have done it really, because it was like a peak lockdown injury, and the only thing I was doing in lockdown was riding my bike to the studio and doing yoga. And I think I just tweaked it like multiple days in a row, like felt one tiny injury that I didn't think did anything, and then just like kept doing yoga because I didn't think there was a problem, and exacerbated it until it turned into a serious issue, which wound up needing surgery.
It's funny you mentioned yoga. I was actually going to ask, are you still doing the yoga? But I guess with injury, the answer is no. But
The
I'm
answer is
glad to hear
no.
that you, yeah, I'm glad to hear you were doing yoga, but it didn't end well. Yeah, so because when you go to yoga class, the first thing they ask every time is there any injuries I need to know about? But were you doing it on your own yoga?
I was doing a YouTube channel called by this fella named Tim Sinesi, which was really good. I was definitely in getting in some of the best shape I've ever been in, but I just was trying to like push it to the limit too hard, I guess, um, instead of backing off when there was pain. So yeah, learned my lesson.
Yeah, that is the con of doing online yoga. And I was going to ask you, is Bagsy still doing the yoga?
I couldn't tell you. I imagine he is. We haven't been in touch. I should
um,
be playing with him in Tunisia in 2 weekends, so I'll find out then.
Yeah, that's Evan Bags for anyone listening, who Gene informed me is the yoga master who can almost levitate with no hands and no feet.
Indeed.
So, to the music, Gene, it's been a busy period for you with the launch of your Nugnet. I think it'd be cool to maybe start there and talk about. Actually, no, before we even talk about that, for anyone who doesn't know who Gene is, I think it'd be cool to give an introduction on the Gene on Earth project as a whole and a bit about your background residing in Berlin right now, but actually from America, if people haven't already guessed.
Yeah, my name's Gene on Earth. I've grew up in California and moved to Berlin just under 10 years ago now. I used to make music under a different name, somewhat unsuccessfully, and then rebranded as Gene on Earth back in 2017, uh, and have put out 6 releases plus an album since then. And now under my Limousine Dream imprint, and now have started a new series called The Sound of Limo, which is going to be for music other than myself, starting things off with a 13-track compilation, which will be coming out next month after a COVID outbreak in the pressing plant delayed it. Followed by solo EPs starting in September with James Andrew and then Sweely, and then some more to be announced after that.
Sick. So if we could take it back, actually, because I was thinking about this. A lot of people always ask me about coming up with artist names, things like that. And I think the beauty of an alias is it almost creates this different persona and something which is almost mystical. And was that part of the approach when creating the Gene on Earth identity?
I was really between two final choices. One was Gene on Earth, and the other one was Gene Arthur, which is my first and middle name, which is obviously just a normal name, basically, which was kind of debating going in that sort of like classic US producer sounding name versus a more unique one-off thing. And normally I'm a person who is more comfortable, specifically back then, more comfortable blending in than trying to stand out with something wacky. But therefore, I just decided to go kind of in the opposite direction of my normal instincts, just to put myself out of my comfort zone and see what happened. The Gene on Earth name just came because I was having a conversation and said the word peace on earth, or the phrase peace on earth, and then thought Gene on Earth. But mind you, I'd been like thinking of names for about 2 years before I came up with that name. So it was just like yeah, but there's no special meaning behind it.
So when you're doing yoga on a Tuesday afternoon, for example, do you feel like you are Gene on Earth, or is it almost like a musical identity that you switch into when you're producing and DJing, or do you feel like day to day it is just part of you now?
I guess it's just pretty much part of me. I mean, I introduce myself as Gene now, whereas I used to introduce myself as Eugene. So
Yeah,
there you
that's
go.
the answer. Yeah, because I think some people create the alias almost as part of something separate to themselves, and you see things like Dead Mouse and things like that. And obviously you've got the cartoon as well, which kind of adds to the. It wasn't your face behind the whole project. Even now, it's mostly. I think a lot of people probably still, when they think of Gene on Earth, they think of the iconic cartoon.
Ideally, so yes.
And was that again part of the image you wanted to create with the whole project? It was quite visual, and then also the sound to go with it.
Yeah. When I was coming up with the whole thing, I was at a point where the previous alias had just been a long trudge that just didn't really go where I was hoping it to. And so I sort of stopped making music, and for what not stopped making music, stopped DJing and focused only on making music for a couple of years in preparation for getting this project ready. But I was basically going under the plan that I would, if this project did not work, I would hang up my headphones, so to speak, and develop another skill or something other than music, because I didn't want to wind up like middle-aged and broke and not having succeeded in this. So I wanted to go all in on it, in like just doing everything to the max that I possibly could, including spending a lot of time making a nice brand, as well as making a ton of music.
Yeah, I think the beauty of it as well, because I remember when I first heard the first few tracks, it very much made it stand on its own 2 feet, just the whole branding and the music. And I feel when people have been making music for a long time, it almost comes with baggage. And I think because you created such a fresh brand, it was almost just like that was it. And there wasn't like, things associated with it. It kind of came in and it was super fresh and super new.
Cheers. Yeah, that was the idea pretty much. It was meant to be a real clean break from the previous one, and I kept it very under wraps that I had even made music under a previous name before. Yeah.
And what were the DJs that influenced the idea of the project originally? Which people were you listening to at the time?
Uh, well, I'd been previously. The previous music had started out as like Beatport, Ibiza, tech house sort of stuff. Um, which that like the stuff that like I don't know the tunes were getting played by like Adam Beyer and like Marco Carolla and stuff like that. Uh, and then when I moved to Berlin, I discovered Panorama Bar and just went there all the time for a couple of years. And so it became more influenced by like the early 2010s Panorama Bar sound, which was sort of like American deep house and house, classic house a lot. Uh, and then I started hanging out with a group of friends, which were like Josh Tweak, James Creed, Phil Kearney, KRN, The Ghost, and these guys, and they had already been digging, whereas I hadn't been digging. Uh, and then they started forcing other DJs on me, such as Zip and Nicholas Lutz and things like that. So I just started getting more informed by the music that those DJs were playing, that my friends were playing when we would have crack-ons or whatever, uh, and that sort of stuff. And then the music I was making started to reflect that. It, and also started to reflect the digging that I was doing myself. Yeah.
And out of interest, how come you chose Berlin out of all the cities in the world to go to?
Uh, when I was in 2009, I lived for 1 year in Bologna, Italy, as a study abroad thing for my university. And while there, I discovered that I much prefer the European way of life, but I wasn't sure that I wanted to spend the time in Italy. This was also while I had decided that I wanted to make music for a living because I was already teaching myself to produce at this time. I didn't have any releases yet then. Uh, pardon me. But then while there, I had a group of friends who were up for clubbing a bit. They weren't like, none of us were serious clubbers at that time. But I basically had an arrangement where every weekend it was in the days of like 30 euro Ryanair flights everywhere, especially from Bologna. And so we just almost every weekend would go to a different European clubbing capital, and I would choose the club night that we were going to, and I'd let them choose the museums and whatever else we were saying. So seeing a lot of like, I was more looking for like laid back Luke and stuff like that at that point in time. Uh, but yeah, I saw him in three different cities. Uh, but it was kind of a toss up. The two top contenders were Berlin and Amsterdam. Uh, and the reason I chose Berlin was that I accurately predicted that I was going to be broke for at least a few years once I got here, and which proved a correct prediction. And I knew that Berlin was going to cost about half of what it cost to live in Amsterdam. So I was just sort of taking that financial burden off of myself and letting myself be in a city where I could live for $300 a month or something like that.
Yeah, that seems to be a common answer when I ask people why they choose Berlin. And I think Ben Rao told me a statistic about the cheapness of rent there. Even though it's going up at the moment, I think it's still one of the cheapest capitals to live in Europe, and
Yeah,
holds so many sick clubs and
yeah.
whatnot. But a lot of people I speak to will also say that it's just the non-stop partying. But it seems like something you're not really sucked into.
Well, I was sucked into it. Not like more when I was going into Panorama Bar and stuff like that. But also, I did plenty of partying. I mean, up until this day, really, and up until Corona, I put some importance on it because that's how I've met tons of people. Is by like going to Club Divisionaire on a Tuesday and hanging out there and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, at one I did also obviously back off of it at one point because when I was you don't have the same vitality when you're 30 that you have when you're 23. Um, yeah, yeah. No, I was doing like big sessions in Panorama Bar all the time back in like 2013 or something like that, uh, and have eased up in favor of spending more time making music now.
Yeah, I'd love to know the statistic of people when they go there, which actually manage to find the right balance. Because I think there's a really funny meme of like the producer goes to Berlin, has the intentions of making music, and then like the last one's then broke, like bags everywhere. And the other one that makes me laugh is the Berlin breakfast with the cigarette and the black coffee. That always gets me.
Yeah.
Um, So yeah, Berlin and versus Amsterdam. I think personally, I love Amsterdam, but yeah, I think it's that's one of the most expensive ones to live in. I think if you want
Yeah.
a studio
It's dead
and the
pricey.
lot. Yeah. So let's talk about the releases more specifically. Then I think the biggest one. Do you think to date still was Like a Glove?
Uh, to be honest, I think the album was. It sold more copies than anything, and that Like a Glove was sort of the biggest single, but the biggest, I would say, but the biggest release, I think was the album. Yeah, it's something about putting out an album really does it for people because it just had very good vinyl sales and very good Bandcamp sales as well. And it's still the thing that people like message me about more than anything, I would say.
Yeah, because I think what's noticeable with your whole project is you've been very specific with the music you put out, and you've not done loads. Whereas a lot of people I speak to now, and I'm kind of a believer of it myself to an extent that people have kind of got to release a lot of music now to even unless the music's exceptional like yours. I think a lot of people, unless they put the time in and build a brand like you've done, kind of before they even go out to the world, they have the vision there. I think a lot of people need to release a lot of music. But was it a very conscious decision to let each EP breathe and give them space and kind of grow upon each release?
Well, at the beginning, I wouldn't say that I was letting him breathe so much. When I put out number one, the Lazy Bones one, I already had number two finished and I had number three partway finished. I had two of the tracks ready, which was intentional because I wanted what had happened to me previously under my previous name was that I would put something out and then I would make the next EP and then I would put that out, but there would be a delay because it takes long. And I would end up having stuff come out like a year apart and just wouldn't build any momentum basically. And so what I was looking to do with this one was have stuff ready to go. So the first one came out in September 2017. The second one came out in February 2018, and the third one came out in October 2018, but there was also one for subsequent, which was in April 2018. So there's four releases within 1 year. So it was pretty fast at
Oh
that
yeah.
point. And that the point was to like get, I mean, based off of the first release doing well, have my name sort of just not leave people's minds by just like sort of bombarding them. And then by number three, I'd sort of established myself to some degree because then I'd have four releases total, and then there was sort of some level of like this is me, and I could start to take my time a little bit more. But the beginning period, the strategy was definitely to put out a bunch of high quality stuff quickly.
Yeah, because I looked on the Discogs and it was, I think, 5 EPs and 1 LP in total on your labels, and then the subsequent one, which is Voigtman's label. That's correct, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, because I saw that and I thought between 2021 we're in now, halfway through, I thought that wasn't actually that much music, but that makes sense completely what you said, and that's my ethos as well. To really break through, it needs that volume of music.
Mm.
But a problem I have, and I think a lot of other people have, is their tastes developing between releases, and especially in a world when you can sometimes wait up to 2-3 years for a release to come out. Um, what is your tips for people that to how to figure out what they genuinely like, or do you think it's just part of the process with sound evolving? Because I feel like with yours, you've very much brought the full package straight away, but do you think that was because you were patient before you put any music out?
Well, I mean, when I put out the first release, I'd already been making music for all almost 10 years. And that it got to that sound only through 10 years of refining, and finally arriving at a sound that was my own. And when someone's like tunes evolve very quickly over a short period of time, like each release is really different. Usually it's because they haven't quite found their own thing yet, and are sort of being blown by the wind a little bit. Um, yeah, I mean, my advice is to be patient and wait until your tunes are really good, or not. But if you're put them out under a name, and then once they start getting really good, put them out under a different name, and just use the first name as a training ground. Because I did. It's not like I regret putting them out under my previous name. It was just a years long learning experience of and learning all the things I should and shouldn't do. Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately, I think some people overthink it as well. And like you said there, ultimately you can always just make a new alias, and the other one can essentially just disappear into the abyss if you make a whole new brand.
Yeah, that was the hardest decision I ever made. It took me two 2 years from like conception of the idea to retiring the alias. So it's like a long drawn out thing. So it's like giving up your identity basically, and starting from zero and just hoping it works. But to be honest, most people I know that have done that, it has worked. That if your gut instinct is telling you to do something, you should trust it, and that's what my gut instinct was telling me to do.
Yeah, I think if it becomes a problem, it's kind of a good problem to have if you believe your music's that good that you could do something about it, something fresh. So it's kind of a happy dilemma.
Mm.
So, in terms of the merch, that's not what to talk to you about. I'm a big fan of people diversifying their income, especially in a scene where it can often be kind of cornered into a way where it's like there's only one way to make money, and that's doing gigs and obviously
Mm.
a bit of music sales. But the merch, what was the idea behind that? Because I myself purchased the Nugsy apron, which I've still not worn actually yet, but it's
Yeah.
sick idea, man.
Yeah.
But I'd love
Yeah.
to know what was the inspiration for all the merch.
Uh, when did I do the last big merch line? I guess the big. Sorry, just waiting as this siren goes by. The. I mean, I've at the beginning of quarantine, for instance, I didn't know how long it was gonna be, but I really, really didn't want to get a job, and so I just have been going. I went through the whole thing basically just coming up with different ideas to make money while also making as much music as possible. And after doing my first T-shirt, which did pretty well, it sold like 150 T-shirts or something, and then repress it sold another 50 to 100. Um, so I saw that you could make money from that stuff, without too much effort when you're using someone like Everpress. All you need is the design, and then they do everything for you. Uh, and the where I got the idea for like that merch drop, which was in September or October or so, which was doing like 6 or 7 pieces at the same time, was from All Gas No Breaks, the Instagram show or page, because he, at the same time, I also tried out doing merch where I mail it myself because you make more money per thing, but I also had to like package and post like hundreds of packages and it takes ages. Uh, and you're like, if you have a bunch of stuff, then, or if you buy a bunch of like round of shirts and then you sell 50 but you still have 20 left, and then someone's buying a new one each week for the next 20 week, then you have to go to the post office once a week every week to sell this single piece of merch.
It's not
So
scalable.
yeah, and so the idea with what I did there was I basically copied the Everpress model by taking pre-orders for 2 weeks and then getting as many as I needed of each of those pieces and then just doing it all at once. And that was what All Gas No Breaks would do. He would do like October merch drop and then have like 20 pieces of merchandise that are only available for 1 week to buy, and then they go out a couple of weeks later. And so then you have to do one big blast of looking after all that merch. You have to deal with customers and sell stuff and or like box stuff up and ship it and all that, and do a bunch of work, but you only have to do it once in one big blast of time rather than doing a little bit by bit over time. Yeah, I mean, when I did that, I was just packing and printing labels for a couple of weeks, but then it was done, and then I had a nice bit of cash to sit on for a while during these somewhat more cashless Corona times.
Yeah, because you mentioned earlier that when you threw your last throw of the dice, as you say, with the music thing, and you said you would have thought about doing something different. I think Corona's taught a lot of us that having all your eggs in one basket, the expression, is kind of a hard way to go, in the long run. And that's something I've thought about a lot during the last year. Like, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? And even from a perspective of, I don't know. I don't know how sustainable it is for a lifetime. If you think about the amount of DJs, I believe I can do it, but the amount of DJs who have actually been around for 20, 30 years isn't actually that many.
No, no, I mean, I'm all in on it, but I have also been learning to diversify. I mean, with the Nugnet course was a good proof that I could make decent money not DJing, and has turned into a sort of like possible exit strategy for whenever I stop DJing, if I still feel like staying involved in some way, doing some sort of course slash school is a nice way to go.
Yeah, that's what's really given me confidence that all the work I've done in the last 8 years or so has got some value if there is no clubs. And it's
Yeah.
kind of rewarding to know that it's not just because to most people it was just like, oh, Josh Baker, yeah, that guy, it's the DJ. But then being able to actually build something off the back of it, like a podcast now, and people are going to listen to us chatting. I think before the pandemic, I wouldn't have really imagined that people would have really been that interested to listen to DJs actually talk, unless it's music. I didn't really think there was much appeal to what we did.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of producers out there, so
Yeah, and there seems to be a fast growing industry, and I think with Instagram and things like that, I think it's only going to get bigger, the whole DJ thing. But like we say about the exit strategy and things like that, I think a lot of it isn't really documented that well in terms of the actual reality of the DJing, because it's all fun and games of the weekend and things like that, but I think you do actually have a lot of spare time. And I think unless you're very self-disciplined and driven to make music and stay busy, do yoga, things like that, I think it could actually be quite a lonely job for people. Not in the typical touring loneliness, I mean just in the Monday to Friday. It's quite a big void of time to be sat doing nothing.
yeah, you've got to be very comfortable being alone, which I am, but not everyone is.
Yeah, I think even when I'm busy, I still find when you're working on your own, living at home on your own, there's a lot of time in your own head, and I think for a lot of people, it's not actually the idealistic lifestyle that they think it will be.
No, no. I mean, you got to put in the hard yards. I spent 10 years of basically not succeeding alone, but and it was definitely tough at times. But it's worth it if you can get to where you want to go.
Yeah, totally. And if you thought about if tomorrow you were dropped on this planet with no money, nothing, have you thought about what direction you'd go if you had to rebuild a career outside of music?
I would try and do something with gardening, probably. That was my main Corona discovery at the beginning. When I At the beginning of I think in mid-April, I decided that I'd wanted to build a garden on my terrace for a while, but I was touring during the summer, and for like tomato plants, you need to water them every day when it's hot summer. And so I was like, this is the summer to do this. And I built, and you can can you see it out there now? Yeah,
Just about. It's some collection now.
yeah, it's coming along. Uh, and I really enjoyed it. It's very therapeutic. I got tons of delicious vegetables off of it. And I spent tons of time researching it. I watched like hundreds of hours of videos on how to do it properly, so that I could get good stuff out of it, and it worked. And I could easily have see myself doing that, just doing it all the time if music didn't exist.
Yeah, I think I may be wrong, but I have a feeling Adam Beyer and his wife, Ida Engberg, live in Ibiza, and they've got like a fully sustainable system, plants where they're vegans, but they actually grow all their own veg, and they'll probably paid off their house, no doubt. So they actually live in a way where they could live forever on their own land because they've got plants growing and maybe some animals. I'm not sure, but I think they're vegan. So, yeah, there is multiple streams of income you can receive from gardening as well, right?
Yeah, I mean my parents have a pretty serious vegetable garden in their yard as well, and they live mostly from it during the summer months at least.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool. There's one thing I've thought about is how much money would I need to have to live forever without needing to chase this endless cycle of like more and more and more. And I think one of the first things you'd want to do is have a house with a garden which sorts your food to a certain extent.
Yeah, you want a garden. That's kind of my not like midterm dream is getting a house that has space for a proper garden, because right now I'm squeezing everything I can onto this terrace. But I'd like to have a full one with a full spread of stuff.
And do you think you're going to stay in Berlin for the foreseeable future?
As for the foreseeable future, yeah. It's still good here. I just have tons of friends here. I certainly am not going back to America. The state of it over there, and the only place that I could potentially imagine myself going to in the like midterm, like maybe in 10 years or something, is somewhere like Portugal or something like that. I would consider it. Um, yeah, we'll see. We'll see how Berlin develops, because it's getting hectic over here. It's like, I mean, there's crazy amounts of construction everywhere, and people are getting priced out and stuff like that. And I'm worried that maybe it will have a San Francisco-like situation, which was being initially a culture capital and then being too cultured for its own good, that everyone moves in and prices the culture out, basically. So let's see how it develops, because it's moving fast. It's getting it's getting bougier by the week.
Yeah, I think Lisbon seems to be quite a good one. I think Dan Ganassi lives there and Dyad. I think it's Lisbon, but
Yes.
the sunshine. I think there's a beach there as well, not too far from there.
Yeah, and there's gonna be better food than in Berlin, I would say. But yeah, sunshine. I mean, I'm from California. It's nice to have sunshine. Uh,
Yeah, my experience with Berlin, there seems to be vegan cafes and restaurants everywhere.
Maybe in the nicer neighborhoods. I'm in a not so nice neighborhood. There's not much around here, but I've got a good rent.
Yeah, I went to Toby Newman's studio like about 2 years ago, and yeah, every single lunch it was a vegan cafe.
Mm,
So I was like, yeah, it's a good job. I don't mind that stuff, but that's what I noticed with Berlin,
mm.
and it's a bit grey for me though. Berlin, I couldn't. I've been a few times, a couple times to party, and then a couple other times, and I just find it so grey. So to me, it would definitely be Portugal over Berlin.
Yeah, there's 6 months of gray from or 8 8 months of gray. I'd say October to June.
So tell me about how the Nugnet School came about, and what was the experience with building it? Because I can probably relate a lot to the technical difficulties that you didn't even know existed until you try and record yourself making music.
Yeah, the idea came around first, obviously, as just another way to stretch my way through Corona without getting a job and doing something useful. And I initially had the idea to basically just do a single track breakdown. So take like I was initially planning on doing probably like a 1 hour or 90-minute breakdown of Like a Glove. Um, and then I wrote a script for it uh, and tested it out on about 4 rounds of a couple of people coming in. Uh, pardon me. And then on one of the last rounds, I was just getting feedback and seeing if people, like from various levels, from like advanced to absolute novice people, to see how they were dealing with it. If the novices could understand what I was saying, and if the advanced people, if they were getting anything useful from it and stuff like that. Uh, and then I had a friend who is very switched on, and he's like, the script uh, makes you seem too stilted. Your personality doesn't come through. You must know what you're talking about, so just give yourself bullet points and freestyle it. But B, you should think about turning it into a full course, which will be a more useful thing because it will be applicable to a wider range of people, and it can become something people really recommend rather than just getting a bunch of little tips out of. It can be something where it can be like the basis of people's knowledge for making music. And so then I retooled the entire thing and came up with the like plan and organization of it, which took a long time because it's turned out to be a 5.5 hour course. So it was a serious project. It took me from ideation to completion was 4 months, probably like 3 months of really solid work on it. Uh, but I mean, it was the perfect Corona project because I had already finished. For the first 6 months of Corona, I wrote an album, and then I was like, well, if I just write another album, I'll have 2 albums, but like, I might end up putting too much music out. So it was a nice way to spend time without wasting it, and doing something useful. And the feedback has been incredible so far.
Yeah, man, it seems like you've absolutely smashed it with the whole Nugnet. And did you find it rewarding doing the videos as well? That's something I've really found with my platform, that it's been really great to help people and receive feedback in a different way. Not just like, oh, your tunes are amazing. Instead, it's kind of like, you've really helped me learn X, learn Y, and see how it's this simple, or things like that.
Yeah. No, it's a good feeling helping people and having people tell you you've helped them. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's something I didn't really think about before all this. I did lessons one on one, but helping a lot of people on big scale is a really good thing for everyone involved, including us as creators.
Yeah, I mean, I was also just hoping to give a lot of people knowledge to like sort of help our individual sector of this scene maybe flourish in the long term by giving people the know-how to make good tunes, possibly being in the style that we favor.
Mm.
Yeah,
The thing is with this, it's not a. I think the term is not a zero sum game. Like if someone else makes it, it doesn't affect us. It's only going to help us because if more people are thriving in the scene, it makes it bigger. And then in the long run, if the scene's bigger, like more gigs, more fees, it's not like really if there's loads more producers making great tunes, the whole scene's going to become bigger. But in the short term, if you kind of get in the short term, obviously, if two new DJs come up tomorrow, maybe they'll get a few more gigs. But in the long term, I think more good producers making more good music only results in good things for everyone in the scene.
indeed. Yeah, that is that is what I'm hoping for because I'd like our specific brand of music to go to a high level, and you need a lot of people for that to happen.
Indeed, I think at the moment, numbers wise, I think it's very much capped at around 600 people if you're lucky in the UK for a venue with artists of our vibe. Then you kind of look at artists that aren't really making, they're not even much bigger than me or you, but then the appeal just seems to be massive, like some of the Dutch artists and that kind of scene seems to be selling out like 2,000 capacity venues in Manchester anyway. Manchester
Mm.
specifically is quite, uh, I say the word tech house
Mm.
in speech marks, but yeah, there's artists that aren't necessarily massive, but they seem to sell out big shows just because it has a really big appeal. So what you say there is right. It would be really good to see our sound translate to, well, it translates, but see it on a regular big scale. Don't get me wrong, small clubs are sick, but it would also be sick to be able to experience the massive rooms on a regular basis, which artists that aren't too different to us get just because the music slightly seems to have a bigger following. But I think it's one of them. A lot of people just listen to what their friends listen to, so it's trying to get that one friend that makes it five friends to get into music that we're making. But often there is a few barriers before you discover where we're at. It's like the laid back Luke thing you said. That's like then you go from laid back Luke to someone else, and there's different layers to the sandwich. But it'd be good with people like us teaching more people if we can try and get up the sandwich a bit.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for.
So the album that you made before, well, at the start of lockdown, is there anything to reveal regarding that?
Uh, Mostly, I just at the beginning of lockdown, I could see that it was going to take a while, and so I was like, might as well get to it, and made myself a goal of finishing an album before the end of lockdown, which obviously ended up proving easy because
Yeah.
I finished it in November. Um, yeah, I got pretty sick with Corona in the months of May and June, and didn't do anything during that period. But once I got out of that in July, I basically was hitting the studio pretty hard, all the way through the year, and have it's been finished for a while. But I held it back while I then because then I had the idea to start the TSOL compilation, and I didn't want to. I'd already put out two releases during Corona, so I decided to save the album until I was sure that we're gigging again. And so yeah, I'm gonna put it out in I think like March next year or something like that, because TSOL is going to be out in July, and then the first releases in from the other guys in September and November. And then I'm going to do a my first remix EP, featuring three of, I think, the best producers in the game, who will remix the non-dance floor tracks from the album, and that will be out a bit earlier in like January or something. Yeah, that's about all. It's all going to be on TSOL. Yeah.
So is the album going to be on TSOL or is that going to be on Limousine Dream?
I think I'm gonna do it on TSOL and then save Limo for the future now, just for solo, my own 4-track club EPs.
So just EPs on that. Yeah.
I think from now on, just my own club EPs, and albums and other artists on TSOL.
And do you have any plans to release on other labels?
Uh, if something comes along that feels right, but if there's not, I don't know. I mean, there's not that much that like favors our sound, if you know what I mean. I like I actually did submit the album to Ninja Tune, and they did not respond. So that was the only outreach I made on that front. Uh, and as far as like other albums with other labels within our scene, definitely not. In terms of more big indie labels like that, if something came along that felt right, I would think about it. But I'm not actively searching for it. Yeah.
I think the beauty of doing it on your own label gives you control over timing as well. I think that's one thing which has fucked me up over the years is the timing that essentially my music tends to get better each EP. I think for most people, they tend to be on a trajectory which is going up, which is kind of normal when it comes to creating stuff. But yeah, delays and things have fucked me up. And I've said that after these next, I've got a few more scheduled in. I really want to only do other labels if it's going to add something to the whole. If I think that label will give me more exposure for whatever reason, because I want to be able to plan things out and know when things are coming, because I think it just offers so much more to the whole promotion thing, sending it out to other artists, and
Yeah. Yeah, that is why I don't really do it outside of my own label, because I'm a control freak, and I like having full control of art, release time, finances, etc., promotion, the whole shebang.
asking for myself, what was the approach when you went to write the album this second time round?
Uh, the approach was to basically just, because I dig. I mean, I listen to a lot of down tempo electronic music. The album is 10 tracks, and there's 5 non-club tracks on it, and 5 club tracks of varying intensities. But the approach was basically to make it kind of home listening friendly, while still having at least a couple of like proper club nuggets, which at the end of the day will drive the sales. Um, but make it cohesive. And I mean, since I just wrote it in one long blast of 5 months or whatever, I'd say it's pretty cohesive. The previous album, Local Fuzz, that was not the approach. The approach was that I had put out number 3, Gary Town, and then I was formulating number 4, but I was writing so many tracks at that time, and I wanted that all of a sudden I noticed that I had almost 2 EPs worth of good tracks, and then I was like, if I write 2 down tempo tracks or ambient or whatever, it will basically be a club album. And so then I just wrote only those two ambient tracks on the album with an album in mind, and then just sort of strung them together in an order that made sense, and it worked. Whereas this one is very purposely meant to be an album. tunes all the way down to like 65 beats per minute, as well as like this sort of like liquid D&B track that's all the way up to 170 or something like that. But it all sits within a, a, a certain sound, I would say. Yeah.
Yeah, because I kind of toyed with the idea a few times, but due to not really getting a solid studio routine, I didn't really take on the project of doing an album. But I always find it quite overwhelming, sat at a blank slate, like, right, I want to write 10 tracks or 8 tracks and put them together, because it is from start to finish. When you start at zero, it's quite a long way to go. But I quite like the idea of what you did the first time round. That was, you made a lot of tracks and then kind of pieced it together.
Yeah, it definitely worked. I mean, if you've been making music for a long time, all of the tracks are going to sound like you pretty much. And yeah, I mean, making a couple of down tempo tracks. If you don't make them, if you haven't made them, but you listen to that stuff and then you make them for the first time, you're going to find it really freeing, because you're not constrained to the constraints of house music that have always bound in what you do for as long as you've done it. Basically, you always have to make it 4/4, and you always have to add a kick hat and a clap and a bass line and all that stuff, which is great. But when you make a down tempo track for the first time, if you at least have some ear for it, you'll find that it's like, I don't know, and it's a world of possibility, sort of. Yeah, I enjoy making those tracks.
And what was the studio routine like when you were in full swing last year?
Uh, Pretty much my daily routine for most of bef- before I snapped my knee was wake up, uh, make breakfast, do yoga, uh, practice German, meditate, and then go to the studio from something like noon to 5 or something, and then return home and cook dinner and hang out and stuff. And I pretty much did that like 5 days a week for 9 months or something like that.
So 5 hours a day, that's more than solid. I think some people like that. That is a long time. I know how long it is, but even like 3 hours solid, you can get so much shit done.
Yeah, I would also do 3 hour days and stuff like that, depending on what I had on. Yeah, but the main key just being going in every day.
Yeah, I think that is the key. I think well, at the moment that was the perfect time to do it. I think around that first blast when there was literally nothing. I think now it's like sunshine and things like that, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to start a big project now, but I have a feeling that after these next few EPs, I want to really try and do something which is more refined and bigger. But at the same
Mm.
time, it's such a daunting task. But I think my approach is going to be every single day, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. is going to be like deep work, no phone, and just use that time no matter what to make music. And then if it doesn't result in anything good, it's going to be kind of a no negotiable time for each day.
Yeah, it's you need to put in time basically every day if you want to get really good at something.
So coming up then, gigs. Obviously, you come into play for You&Me in August the 7th, which fingers crossed should be a green light. But I have to say, I know Chris Stussy played in Manchester 2 weeks ago, and he had to quarantine before he came. As in, he landed and had to quarantine for 5 days, I think it is.
Yeah,
So I'm hoping that we don't have anything like that come
yeah, I hope
August.
so. I've got 2 gigs that weekend because I'm also playing in London on the Friday. Um, yeah, hopefully it starts to resolve itself. I'm getting my second jab at the end of July, so I'll be just about to be fully vaxxed, but not quite, I don't think yet. Although I don't know how much they're considering that these days. But yeah, got that. I've got a few other ones in July. I've got one in Tunisia next week, but I'm still not sure if I can make it with my knee. And then one in London on the 26th, but it's looking pretty iffy, that one. Uh, and then one in Paris and another one in Italy in July. Yeah, not loads, but there's some nice ones.
Yeah, I think as a promoter myself, it's kind of just I don't know. It still seems like a dream to actually be back in person in a club. And if I'm completely honest, I'm skeptical that it's meant to be 2 weeks' time. We're meant to be back in the
Yeah, I
UK,
know.
but I think it's going to be um, at least 2 weeks after that.
Extended.
But
Yeah.
who knows? And I saw you playing for Fuse as well, which is cool.
Yes.
At the
In that.
Printworks, they're the kind of gigs that it'd be amazing if they were a more regular thing. I think for our kind of scene, whereas I think it's kind of the obviously Enzo's Fuse is absolutely massive, but it's quite an exception for the underground. But it would be amazing if there was more parties like that. I think.
Yeah, yeah, I'm excited to play that one. I've spent a lot of time and money on records, buying music more for that bigger room sound. I think probably like I have like three full squares of records now that are purely meant for festivals and big room stuff like that. It's annoying because I've got so many good ones that I've bought over the last months, and I can never play them at like little house dues because they're just too massive to be playing inside.
Yeah,
But
I know the feeling.
I am excited to play those this summer because I think quite a lot of the gigs are going to be a bit larger this summer.
Yeah, I think for ours, I'll pre-warn you now, it's going to be strictly big records. It's like a massive outdoor space, so it's going to be one for the party tunes. And
Cool.
one thing I've thought though, because I've bought records fairly regularly over the pandemic, I've now got records across loads of squares, and I'm trying to remember which ones are which because a lot of the time for me it was associating records with weekend to weekend, and that's kind of how I remembered them. I'm like, that's 2 weeks old. I know which record that is, but now
Mm.
I've got this whole almost like going back into a record shop and trying to retrace my steps of which ones are the good ones.
Yeah, I mean, I've got mine pretty much organized. There's moods. There's a big room section. There's a darker, more weird section. There's a warm up section. There's a down tempo section, and then there's just general house. And then there's another section which is my like classics, but that I've like caned for too long that I don't really play them anymore. But they're too good to sell. But yeah, pretty much the how the it's mostly by mood, but it's filtered into the squares in a chronological order, so I sort of know where everything is. But really, if I'm packing for a gig, if it's a very different mood than the previous gig I've played, I pretty much will go through every single record in my collection. Not listen to, but I'll flick through every single
Yeah,
one
yeah.
just to get what I need. Yeah,
And do you think after all this you'll still be playing records mostly?
yeah. I mean, I just I wasn't buying records much during for a lot of uh, the pandemic just because my cash flow was actually okay, but I was not sure how long this was going to last and how long I can keep finding ways to generate cash, and so I was just being very conservative, basically. But now that I've finally had a nice blast of income from the Nugnet, I just bought a ton of records in the last month, and yeah, I don't see myself playing much in the way of digital still. Maybe couple a couple of my unreleased stuff. That's about it. But even that stuff, I often end up getting made into dub plates and stuff like that. Yeah, I keep a USB for backup, but it's not something I'm really looking to use.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm going to be prepared. I remember I spoke to Enzo, and he said he rips every single record's USB when he gets them. And I think in the long term, I think it would be a good practice to get into.
It is good practice. It just takes freaking ages if you get like 30 records at a time or something like that. It's like you're going to spend hours doing that.
I know, but it's like compounds against itself if you don't do it now. Because it's like every time it's like, oh, it's going to take ages. I think I tried to do some before I gigged the other week, and then I kind of do a few, and then I'm just like, oh, what even is the point? Like, what is these 5 records on a USB going to do anyway?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a long task. So,
Yeah.
Gene, to finish every podcast, I always do some quick fire questions, which I've not actually got wrote down in front of me, but I can remember some of them off the top of my head. So, are you ready?
Yeah.
The number one is, what is your favorite quote?
Uh, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Wayne Gretzky.
That's a good one. Favorite book you've read in recent times? Or ever, actually. Favorite book ever?
I've done a lot of reading in the last year. A really good one that I have read is called Rivertown by Peter Hessler, which is about it's a non-narrative nonfiction about a American who was one of the first Peace Corps guys teaching in rural China, and he sort of illustrates how China has evolved in the like mid 90s and how it went from a communist no man's land into a world superpower, and it is very good, very funny, and very illuminating. And in terms of more on the productivity tip, probably uh, Deep Work by Cal Newport was a very useful book for me. It made me extremely productive after reading that. Yeah,
Yeah, that's a sick one, Cal Newport. I think it's a yearly read, that one, to kind of
yeah,
reinstate the importance of deep work, which is something
yeah,
I need to probably read soon.
yeah. It's a beauty.
Next question, what's your go-to breakfast?
Uh, two fried eggs, a bunch of spinach that's been cooked down, fried mushies, and some sugar-free baked beans, Heinz. Yeah.
Those beans are good shit, man. I always eat them and people laugh at me, but I said you get used to the lack of salt and sugar after like 2 times of having them, and then it's like normal beans.
Yes, that is correct. Um, yeah, that's my. I didn't used to do that, but in my sort of health quest, and I don't eat meat either. That's a nice big protein boost in the morning that leaves you not hungry for most of the day.
Favorite yoga position?
Uh, Downward dog.
Chilling in downward dog, man. I've
Yeah.
not done yoga since like I was doing yoga with me in I was doing yoga with you in my studio at like a daft o'clock when I was doing
Oh
the
yes.
crow and all that. But I've
I
literally,
forgot about that. Yeah, yeah, the
yeah,
crow. Correct.
yeah, yeah, and because everywhere's short, I feel like the beauty of yoga was when I was actually in a class and surrounded by people in the real zen. And man, it's crazy how stiff I've gone after not stretching. So anyone listening, the best thing you'll ever do is actually start yoga. And I always tell everyone this, but I'm not practicing what I preach right now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only not practicing because of this freaking thing. I haven't done it since March, and it's very annoying.
Yeah, I feel like there is something about it that can cure the world. Like anything, I don't know what it is, but it feels like that is the answer to the world. But I think it all stems from Buddhism and things like that. But I feel like yoga itself, if everyone did it, it would cure any aches and pains as long as
Mm,
it's not broken, and it would also make everyone much nicer and much more mindful in the way they live.
My shoulders and triceps are getting pretty hench from crutching around though.
Ah, but
Crutching up and down stairs all the time.
yeah. Well, that was the same for the crow. The crow's good for the arms as well.
Something or other, yeah.
And then the last question is one that always gets people thinking. What do you know now that you wish you knew then?
Uh, Not uh, to work every day.
So not to work every day, yeah.
No, no, to work every day. That's
To work every day.
yeah. And to yeah, that's the main one. And don't copy your contemporaries, sort of. Yeah.
Good shit, man. Yeah, I think my recent quote to someone was just do the fucking work. I think
Yeah.
sometimes you can ask every single question, you can have every solution to every problem, but unless you do the fucking work, sometimes, well, no, every time, if you don't do the fucking work, you won't get the fucking results.
Mm.
And I guess many of our peers are our peers because they've actually done the fucking work. But then I think I'm experiencing now a lot of people that kind of want the answers but won't actually do the work. But it's
Mm.
in every area of life, I think.
Mm.
So, Gene, that was an absolute pleasure. We are going to attach a discounted link to the Nug.net course below the
Yes.
video. Yes.
Use the code SYNTHO for a 20% discount on Nugnet. It's nug-net.com.
Yeah, man. We'll attach all the links and anyone you want to shout out, any producers to look out for. That's always quite a good one, actually.
Pretty much everyone on the Sound of Limo compilation. That is because there's some younger up and comers on there that are good and have some good stuff in the works from them. Yeah.
Sweet, man. So I will see you next time, hopefully, August the 7th. Will you be on crutches? That is the question.
I don't think so, as long as I haven't freaking re-injured my knee. So yeah, hopefully I should be off crutches by then, and hopefully that goes down without a hitch.
Yes. So yeah, no more yoga between now and then.
No, no.
You could probably still do the crow, can't you?
Yes, biffy.
Cool, man.